Greetings, everyone. Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility. That's right, you guessed it. It's Wednesday, new release day. Today we've got a little book to show you in this particular episode. And as you can see, I'm wearing my Deep Purple Burn shirt. I'm wearing it for a reason because we're celebrating a brand new book by Adrian Jarvis called Sculpting in Rock, Deep Purple 1968 to 1970. As you can tell by the title of the book, this book is centered on the period that led up to recording the album In Rock. Okay, one of the notable albums in heavy music history. Okay, it's often been kind of noted as one of the great kind of proto-metal albums of all time, alongside, Led Zeppelin's first two albums, Black Sabbath's first two albums, Uriah Heep, very heavy, very humble, right? Deep Purple in Rock, one of those early heavy favorites. Perhaps a kind of one and done for Deep Purple, right? The one album that's really heavy like that, where they would go off into all sorts of different places throughout the course of their career. And what Adrian kind of notes a lot throughout this book is that the creation of heavy music had a lot to do with the creation and utilization of the fuzz box. So he talks a lot about the fuzz box throughout this book and how, this was really the one album that Deep Purple, or Blackmore in general, well, John Lord as well, using fuzz on his Hammond organ, but Blackmore used the fuzz box quite a bit on this album. And a lot of the early heavy bands were using fuzz, Hendrix, of course, and Blue Cheer, and The Who, right, and all the other bands we mentioned before. So let's give you a little look at the back of the book, right? This is Weimer Publishing, okay? There is Mark II. And interestingly enough, after reading this book, and I remember, Adrian contacted me and, asked me if I wanted to read and review his book. And he goes, I know how much you love In Rock. This is a book all about In Rock. And I'm like, cool, right? It's my favorite Purple album. However, in finishing this book, it's really not all about In Rock. It is and it isn't. This is more about the kind of coming of the Mark II lineup, because it gives you a bit of history on Mark I, of course, with Nick Simper and Rod Evans in the bass and vocal slot. It goes into a little history of Deep Purple and what they were doing as, when they formed. So this is just as much a history of Purple as it is a look at the importance of a particular album. In fact, I think it's more so a history of Deep Purple up to the In Rock, or the Mark II era. So he spends a lot of time kind of talking about the other bands that the guys were in, how they formed, the initial sessions and things. It talks a bit about the Concerto for Group and Orchestra, and how that kind of came about, and then how that led to In Rock. Funny enough, though, not a ton of time in the book is spent on talking about the album itself. There is and there isn't, right? It's not a song-by-song analysis of everything that is In Rock. Yeah, you get a little bit of, here's the album, here are the cool songs, and here's the significance of some of them. But it's not, because the book is not all that long. It's about 180-something pages, but really of just text, it's about 170, and then you got 20 pages of notes and references. So, when you really, I don't know what I was expecting. It's like I don't know if you could spend 170 pages just talking about one album, right? So obviously there's got to be other stuff here. And the other stuff here is very cool. So talk about some of the live shows and the sets that they were playing, and the improvisation in the early part of the Mark II era, and how they were still playing Mandrake Root and Wring That Neck, and a couple other songs that were still in the set list, Painted Black, where the band would expand upon obviously greatly and do lots of improvs, lots of solos between drums and organ and guitar. Talks a bit about the early relationships within the band. Talks a little bit about the relationships with previous members of the band. That I thought was kind of interesting. Talks a little bit about the follow-up album, okay, and how Fireball is vastly different to In Rock. And then with that in mind, how obviously Machine Head is different as well. And then talks about, who do we think we are, and goes a bit into the Mark III era of the band and how Adrian, and he's right in line with me. It's interesting how when I was reading at the end of the book his kind of ranking of like the top 5 or 6 Deep Purple albums of all time, his ranking is pretty much identical to mine. How Burn is such a classic, and while Stormbringer is also really, really good, Stormbringer is very, very different from Burn, whereas you have the kind of hard rock meets the funk and the soul type of thing. And then how he talks about how Come Taste the Band is actually going back to the original sound a bit, still incorporating the bluesiness and the funkiness, but it's more of a heavy rock record that owes more to In Rock than it does to Stormbringer. And he goes into a little bit about, the reformation in the 80s with Perfect Strangers, and how, in his mind, it's not quite the classic that I think most people expected it to be, although a very strong album. And then the kind of missteps, right, with the next 2 albums. And he does spend a little bit of time talking about the Steve Morse era and how great, Perpendicular is, and how Abandon is probably the heaviest album since In Rock. I would agree with that 100%. How the next 2 albums are maybe not quite as strong, Lord leaving the band. And then the last 3 Bob Ezrin albums, he goes on a little bit about that and how strong those are, and how they're more, less heavy rock and more kind of like, prog in a lot of ways. So a really, really interesting analysis, I think, of the band in general, even though the bulk of the book is centered on the In Rock period. It's not all about In Rock specific. So I think but what's really cool is it kind of takes you back to those couple of years, right? Which for many of us are the formative years of Deep Purple, and some of the most important years. But yeah, not a lot of time is spent on, the tours of Japan that made like the Made in Japan album, and not a lot of time is spent on Machine Head and the end of the Mark II era. It's more about the beginning of the Mark II era. So I think for all Deep Purple fans, I think this is well worth checking out. It's a fun read. Just you have to kind of change your expectations a little bit. It's not a 170-page book all about the In Rock album. That the In Rock album is like the inspiration for the whole book, but the whole book is not all about In Rock, if that makes any sense. So yeah, check it out. And there are, I got some photographs in here as well, some black and white stuff. Yeah, oops, going the wrong way. Those early shots of Ian Gillan, right? Big curly hair. Some cool live shots there. Early Mark II. Cool stuff. Blackmore in action. Gillan looking all sorts of cool. They also talk about. He talks about the various projects that were going on during this period as well. So, of course, Ian and Jesus Christ Superstar, and, the Gemini Suite, and, Blackmore doing a couple of little side things as well. Also goes a little bit in depth into some of the seeds that are planted for Blackmore eventually wanting to leave Purple to form Rainbow. The whole Quatermass thing, Black Sheep of the Family, the introduction of that song, and it's very interesting stuff. And obviously written by a fan, which is the cool thing. And that always, to me, it's like if you're going to write a book about, one of these type of bands, you have to be a fan. You have to know the music really, really well. So, yeah, well worth seeking out. Like I said, Weimer Publishing, and that's spelled WYMER publishing.co.uk. All right, so Sculpting In Rock, Deep Purple, 1968-1970, Adrian Jarvis. There's some additional information for you there. So go ahead and check it out. If you're a Deep Purple fan, you're going to want to read this. And visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. All together. All the damn time. Stay tuned for more stuff here on the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell. We also have the links below to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, as well as our merch page for all sorts of cool Sea of Tranquility stuff. A few of our best-selling shirts are now available on Amazon. There's the link below down as well to go head over to Amazon to get our best-selling shirts at a discount on Amazon in lots more different colors. Lots of cool colors. Kind of interesting seeing like some of our Sea of Tranquility shirts in green and red and all sorts of cool stuff. So that's pretty neat. So go check that out, and we hope to see some of you at the Chance in Poughkeepsie, New York on Saturday, October 1st. A full day of music talk, discussion, and music itself, right? We've got headliners Nectar, Vanilla Fudge, Pat Travers Band. We've got Epic Tantrum, great prog band from upstate New York. We've got a trio featuring Sea Tranquility's very own Rick Labonte, Louis Nasser, and Eric Porter. We've got Chris Caffrey from Savatage and Trans-Siberian Orchestra in the house, as well as Andy Powell from Wishbone Ash. So it's going to be a fun day. Martin Popoff's there as well. Everybody from the Hudson Valley Squares and in the Prague seat and the Monsters Den. Everybody's going to be in force, so come check it out. Join in on the fun. Tickets are available now, and we hope to see you there. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.